Close your eyes and let the weight of the modern world drift away. Imagine, for a moment, that everything you were told about the past was a whisper designed to keep a secret. We are taught that the medieval world was a dark, suffocating place for women, that they were merely shadows, passing from the shadow of a father to the shadow of a husband. But tonight, we uncover a hidden truth. What if I told you that 700 years ago, some of the most powerful, wealthy, and content individuals were women who deliberately chose to live without men? They weren't outcasts. They were empires. The femme sole superpower in the year 1287. The bustling streets of Cheapside London were alive with the smell of roasted meats and expensive spices. If you walked through the market, you might expect to see men at the helm of every great business. But city records tell a different story. 1 in 4 property-owning merchants were unmarried women. One of them was Marjorie Duclair. She didn't just survive, she dominated. She imported French wines and owned multiple estates. Marjorie wasn't an anomaly. She was a femme sole woman alone. In a world where marriage meant civil death, where a woman's identity was legally swallowed by her husband, femme sole status was a legal superpower. These women could sign contracts, sue in court, own land, and, most importantly, keep every single coin they earned, while society expected them to be desperate. Records from the British National Archives revealed they were living their most excellent lives. The venture capitalist of York, consider Agnes Sampson from 14th century York. She was a textile titan, managing a supply chain that spanned 3 countries and employing hundreds. When pressured to marry, she wrote in a business letter that has survived 7 centuries, "I'd rather kiss a plague rat. My gold stays in my purse." Agnes, and others like her, didn't view singleness as a lack of something. They viewed it as the presence of everything: freedom, agency, and an undivided soul. Society often tries to paint the single woman as a figure of pity. Yet, the private diaries of women like Isabella de Fortes describe a life of high intellectual culture. Mornings managing vast estates, afternoons studying with scholars, and evenings filled with music and storytelling. They weren't lonely, they were sovereign. But as these women grew in power, the world they lived in began to tremble. Their happiness was a threat to the natural order, and soon, the era of erasure would begin. The rise of the Bajans as we travel across the English Channel to the misty lowlands of Flanders in 1230. We encounter the most radical social experiment in history. Imagine a city within a city, a place where the cobblestones are clean, the air is quiet, and every door belongs to a woman. These were the over 200,000 women across Northern Europe joined this movement. They weren't nuns. They took no permanent vows. They simply chose to live in a world where men were not the center of gravity. The textile titans, the Begins, didn't just live together. They worked together. They became the backbone of the European textile industry. In the city of Bruges, records show they produced 60% of all fine cloth exports. They controlled the supply chains and the profits. They invented the concept of the intentional community 700 years before modern sociology had a name for it. They had flexible work schedules, retirement security for older members, and a quality of life that was unheard of for the era. The kingdom of widows. While the Bajans built communes, another group of women was seizing power at the highest levels of government. The wealthy widows. In medieval law, widowhood was the ultimate power-up. In 14th century Venice, widows controlled 35% of all private wealth. Take Caterina Cornaro, who ruled the Kingdom of Cyprus for 15 years. When she eventually abdicated, she negotiated a deal that made her one of the richest people in the world. She turned down marriage proposals from 3 different kings, famously stating that she had tasted the wine of independence and found the bread of subjugation too bitter to swallow. The soft power of soft silk. These women used soft power. They funded cathedrals, bankrolled royal wars, and established the first scholarships specifically for girls. They understood that money was the only shield against a world that wanted to control them. But the more they succeeded, the more the patriarchal structures, the church, and the law began a collective meltdown. How could a woman be so insufferably content without a master? The answer to their success was not celebrated. It was criminalized. The success of these women was soon reframed as something sinister. The very traits that made them great, their business acumen, their confidence, their refusal to marry, became the evidence for the darkest chapter in human history. The witch hunts. Between 1450 and 1750, up to 100,000 people were executed. 85% were women, and a staggering number of them was single, wealthy, and independent. The message was clear: if you live without a man, you must be in league with the devil. The fire was only one way society tried to destroy the independent woman. The other was language. Consider the word spinster. In the 1300s, it was a title of honor for a skilled professional, a woman who spun wool. But by the 1700s, the word was hijacked. It became a legal label of shame for any woman who failed to marry, while an unmarried man was a bachelor, a term suggesting potential and freedom. The spinster was framed as a failure, an old maid, something on the shelf. Visual words appearing on a dark background, shifting from artisan to outcast. The author-entrepreneur. Despite the linguistic warfare, some women used their wit to build new empires. Meet Christine de Pizan, the first professional female writer in Europe. A widow with 3 children, she refused to remarry and instead turned her pen into a sword. She wrote the Book of the City of Ladies in 1405, a manifesto defending the intellectual equality of women. She designed her own manuscripts and controlled her own distribution, becoming one of the highest-paid authors of her time. She proved that the mind has no gender. Visual. An inkwell and a quill pen sitting on a desk, the quill moving as if by an invisible hand. The science of happiness. What is most shocking to modern researchers is the health of these women. Analysis of medieval hospital records and wills shows that unmarried women lived longer, had lower stress levels, and were 40% more likely to express genuine life satisfaction than their married peers. They had larger social networks and more sovereignty over their existence. They discovered 700 years ago what we are still learning today. Being alone does not mean being lonely. Independence isn't a consolation prize. It is often the grand prize. We did not evolve into independence. We are reclaiming it. The stories of these women were erased because their happiness was too dangerous for a controlled society to witness. But tonight, their voices return to us, reminding us that a woman's worth is not measured by the person beside her, but by the world she builds with her own hands. If these forgotten chronicles of strength have brought you peace tonight, I invite you to join our circle. Subscribe to Slumber Lore, and let these echoes of history guide your rest. Sleep well, knowing you were never incomplete to begin with. What part of their story surprised you most? I'll be in the comments, waiting to hear your thoughts.